Today on The Divide, joints for jabs, a catchy slogan or an important incentive?
Our goal right now is to be able to get shots in arms and joints in hands by the 4th of July.
Also, in an effort to protect renters, has Seattle become an inhospitable environment for landlords?
I oppose evictions because housing should be a human right.
We don't want to lose affordable housing in the city of Seattle. We don't want people to stop being landlords.
Plus, a prime example of how government is becoming more performative and less productive. That and more as we attempt to bridge the divide. Hello, and thank you so much for joining us on The Divide and sticking with us through vacation. As you know, I took a little vacation down to Mexico, and it was, I don't mean to brag, but it was absolutely wonderful. However, I missed a lot while I was gone. Apparently, I go out of the country and all this wild stuff happens, including offering a $1 million lottery prize to people who are vaccinated. I did a poll on Twitter asking you guys if you won any of the prizes in the Lotto for Shadow vaccine chance, what you would spend it on. Here's what you had to say. 52% said you would pay off your mortgage. Very wise use of your money. 39% said you would spend it on fun. 6% on charity. And 3% said you would give it back to Uncle Sam. Look, I hate government ways, but there's no way I'm giving that money back to the government. There was already a $250,000 lotto drawing. A man named Lance R. won it. And no, that's not Seattle mayoral candidate Lance Randall. I asked him. He said, not him. And Lance R. didn't want to do interviews, but he did put out a statement about his winnings. He said, there will be 3 more lucky Washington winners of this lottery over the next 3 weeks. And then on July 13th, someone who is vaccinated will be even luckier than I am today and win $1 million just for doing the right thing. So that from Lance R., the first big winner in the state's shot of a lifetime competition. Just crazy. But even more wild than that incentive was another one that happened while I was gone on vacation. The whole joints for jabs. Get a joint if you get a jab. I mean, we saw how, bars and restaurants were able to give out free beer if you've had a vaccine, but this, I suppose that's very apt in a state like ours. If you get a vaccine, you can get a free joint from a marijuana store, but it's not quite that simple. Not as simple as it was for bars to give out free beer. I spoke to the COO of #Cannabis about his desire to participate in the Joints for Jabs program, but also about some of the roadblocks that might be in the way. Do you ever think you'd live to see the day where the government would try to incentivize vaccinations via free joints?
If you asked me 6 years ago, Brandi, if marijuana would even be legal in my lifetime, I would have doubted it. But here we are. 2021 is proving to be just as strange and exciting as last year and many years before it. But I'm really excited at the development and the opportunity to be able to help people in my community get vaccinated.
So, the same as it was with beer, basically, or bars where you could say, give out a pint of beer for people who have a vaccine. It was a little easier for bars. So you could, if I were a patron, I would bring in my vaccination card, say, hey, I got a vaccine, and I'd get a free drink. It's not as simple for you guys, right? So explain the process that you're going to have to go through if you want to do this.
For sure. And like everything in the cannabis industry in Washington, it's always in a state of revision and rewriting and improvement. So as it stands at the moment, the Washington State Liquor and Cannabis Board, our regulatory body, sent out guidance on Monday in response to some lobbying from other retailers, cannabis retailers in the state, asking, hey, what can we do to incentivize people to get their vaccine? Can we give anything out? After much consideration, the LCB, as we call it, the Liquor Cannabis Board, decided to give the go-ahead on the condition that so long as someone comes and gets their vaccine same day at the location they're visiting, they can get a free joint.
Yeah, so there is some, as you said, you have to have an on-site vaccination clinic. For a pot shop owner, is all of that feasible to get a clinic, get somebody there to give the vaccines, all within this period that this is allowed for?
That's what we're going to find out. Because like you mentioned, there's a short window. We have until July 12th, is what the LCB has advised us on, in order to set up pop-up clinics and give out joints for people who do get vaccinated. So it's a challenge, but that's one of the things that attracts me, and I think a lot of people to this industry, is that we get a kind of pathfind to solve new challenges, and it's exciting. So we're going to find out very soon.
So you're going to try it. You're going to try to do it.
Oh, yeah. I've been speaking with my team and contacting a wide variety of people at the Department of Health, visiting pop-up clinics just to talk with the people who are on the front lines giving these vaccines. Our goal right now is to be able to get shots in arms and joints in hands by the 4th of July.
So it's definitely a school of thought that when it comes to alcohol, when it comes to weed, that the government shouldn't be sort of incentivizing vaccines via, consumption of booze or weed. What would you say to those people who believe that?
And that is a really valid question. One thing that I would say is that oftentimes doing the right thing is awfully hard. And this last year, I think, has been difficult for many, many people. So I'm excited that we're just getting the opportunity to promote vaccination to our communities, to really encourage people for whatever reason, if it's for a beer or a joint or personal satisfaction, to make that tough decision and get their vaccine.
And I also find it pretty unlikely that you might have somebody who doesn't smoke weed already who's like, yeah, I'm going to go get my vaccine just so I can get a free joint. I just don't see that.
That would be very surprising. But another thing, even though cannabis has been legal in the state of Washington for years now, every day at our shops, we see people who are brand new to cannabis, who may have spent their entire lives thinking they would never, ever use it. So I'm not 100% confident that this will bring in new people to try cannabis for the first time. But then again, that's not the point. The point is to help people get shots in arms and for us to do our part. It's, I think, a really cool development that this is in recent memory the first time the cannabis industry and shops like mine are being treated like a normal business to promote vaccines in this way. 5-6 years ago, it wouldn't have been possible to give out joints for any reason. So I'm glad that we get the opportunity, and I'm very thankful to the LCB for allowing us to do this. I think it shows that we've proven ourselves as an entire industry, not just my shops, but that we work hard, we comply with the law, we meet the highest requirements, I think, for most in many industries, and that we work with integrity.
Can I ask you, while I have you, Jeff, how has the pot business been during the pandemic?
It has been exciting, I'll tell you, Brandi. I remember this time last year, a little bit before in April, when Governor Inslee was making announcements, and our world was really shifting. When I was helping people at our shop in Seattle, they would ask us, hey, are you guys going to be here tomorrow? And I honestly didn't know what to tell them. I'm very grateful that Governor Inslee and the state decided to consider cannabis shops like ours essential. And ever since that day, people have been coming, not only to get help with, hey, doing something fun and recreational during lockdown, but getting help for people who, have trouble sleeping, or have a brother that has cancer, or a mother or a sister, that these people are coming into our shops, something as strange and alien as a cannabis shop, just to see if anything or anyone can help them. So this has been exciting.
I'm sure that you saw this. People were ticked at the onset that pot shops were essential and a lot of other businesses were not. How did you sort of handle that criticism as it was coming in?
Yeah, and that's valid criticism. There are so many great businesses that had to shut down, not by choice, but by the fact that they were forced to. I'm very grateful that we were able to continue serving our guests, because many of our guests don't have other options. It's not like you can go to your primary physician and he'll just pick out whatever cannabis strain or product or tincture is best for you. That's not an option. So many of the people that visit us do so not just to get high, but to really improve the quality of their life. And I'm thankful we still get the chance to do that.
And certainly if hashtag cannabis has one of those clinics and they're giving out joints for jabs, we will go. We'll bring a camera and be there and see what it's all about. Fascinating times that we're living in, indeed. And if you want to hear more of my conversation with Jeff, you can download the Divide podcast, and we'll have that up for you tomorrow. All right, coming up after the break. Has Seattle become an inhospitable environment for landlords? Also, Governor Jay Inslee ousted the head of the state's prison system, but didn't want to say so publicly. The Seattle Times story that perfectly illustrates government's dysfunction. Stick around. Welcome back to The Divide, which is coming to you from my home studio in lovely East King County today. As you guys know, I was out of the country for a couple weeks, and so just company policy, spending a few days at home, and so relaxing in my home studio, bringing you The Divide this week. You know, a lot of stuff has happened this week, and while I was gone for that matter, but the city of Seattle passing 3 new controversial and pretty divisive, in some instances, protections for renters. They were backed in part by Seattle's socialist city councilwoman, Shama Sawant.
As far as the corporate landlord lobby is concerned, it's going to be business as usual now that vaccinations have been available and the economy is starting to go back to what seems like a little bit of a normalcy since the last year.
So the new laws are threefold in the city of Seattle. One prevents against school year eviction, so it makes it a little bit more difficult to, for instance, evict families with school children or teachers during the actual calendar school year. Another one provides COVID-19 protection. So if you couldn't pay your rent during the pandemic, you've got this big bill that has accrued. Well, once the eviction moratorium ends, right now it's set to end on June 30th, could be extended. But once that ends, you can't just be evicted because you've got this big back payment that is owed due to the pandemic. And then the third one gives you what's called right of first refusal. So if you want to stay, you haven't necessarily done anything wrong, you have the right to say, yes, I'd like to stay and to renew my lease. Now, all of these protections are great for renters, but there's a concern among some that especially during the pandemic, more has been done to protect renters than has been done to ensure that landlords, especially small landlords, are compensated properly for those protections. And when you take them all into consideration, I spoke to Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkan about whether Seattle is becoming an inhospitable environment for landlords. Do you agree with the 3 bills?
I've not had a chance to review those bills, and I'll review them probably at the beginning of the week and make a decision on those. And so I want to look at those. I know that we do need to protect renters and stop evictions because we don't want to make our homeless problem worse. But we also have to recognize that each time we do this, if we're not getting that rental assistance to landlords, particularly small landlords, we're creating a problem somewhere else.
Yeah, and although, you need time to review them, surely you know the gist of them by now, right?
I think it's important to read something before you decide what you're going to do on it.
Gotcha. So, you talk about needing to help out landlords, for instance, and this has been a frustration. There are landlords who I've spoken to who are owed upwards of $30,000 from tenants who they just haven't even been able to communicate with. Has the city done enough to where protections are given to renters to come in on the back end and help landlords, especially the small landlords who rely on those units to make money?
We will continue to work with those landlords, and we were with the city advocated very strongly at the state level to get more money from the state for that kind of protection and to make sure that we could get money in rental assistance going right to landlords to protect and provide that buffer. We also lobbied, I personally lobbied, the federal delegation in the White House, and were able to get federal dollars allocated for that. So there is a lot of relief that's coming in the pipeline. And what we really need to do is gauge where is it and how do we get it to the people that need it most as quickly as we can.
But do you think enough has been done for landlords?
I think we will continue to do stuff. I mean, I think this pandemic has been so difficult on everyone, landlords, small business owners, employees. And we are now in the stage where we're recovering, but at the same time, there's a lot of people who are going to need that direct assistance to make up gains and to keep themselves whole. So that's one reason why in our rescue dollar funding, we have a significant amount for direct financial assistance for people who have housing insecurity, food insecurity, because they need to not just make it through, we need to make sure that we keep people housed. And so I think all of this has to work together.
So do you think enough has been done for landlords to this point?
I think that we have done, the city of Seattle has done probably more than any individual city, but collectively, the city can't solve the problem itself, whether it is landlords or people who need, rental assistance or unemployment or small businesses that needed assistance. So that's why it's so important to have all of us working together.
And, when we talk about this conversation and the bills passed by the city council, I don't believe that there's anybody who says, yes, let's put school children out on the street during the school year. Let's remove people from their homes in the middle of a pandemic when they haven't been able to make any money. And so I think there's people who understand the need for some of those protections. But at the same time, as we've discussed, you have these small landlords who they don't have these big complexes. They maybe have a house or a couple units, and that is their source of income. So when it comes to protections given to renters, do you believe it has to be, at the end of the day, equal? That if we're going to allow renters to stay in their home without paying rent for 12 months, that the government has to reimburse fully those landlords for the money they've lost?
So I think, as you know, Brandi, there's a number of lawsuits pending on this. And if you talk about what's the legal requirement, I'm going to let the litigation decide that. But what is government supposed to do? Our job is to try to help as many people as we can. And so that we want to, I think, as you said, everyone agrees, we want to keep as many people housed as possible. We know this pandemic has ravaged, our community, and that many people don't have the money for rent. But we also know there's a lot of landlords who depend on that rent to pay their mortgage, to pay their property taxes. And so government has to find a way to address both of those things, which is, again, why we as a city lobbied really hard at the state level and federal level to make sure that there was enough funding there that could help both sides of this equation. No city can do any of this alone to address the magnitude of this problem, but we recognize that we gotta address both sides of the equation. Because the last thing we want also is not just the landlords themselves to be hurt. We don't want to lose affordable housing in the city of Seattle. We don't want people to stop being landlords and sell the small houses that now are a really important source for families to be housed.
There is a feeling among some landlords that Seattle has become an inhospitable environment for them. And when we talk about, potentially landlords leaving the city, you've got these three latest bills by the council. You have Elise Shamas who wants to pursue other renter protections. If I am a landlord, why would I stay or come to Seattle to do business?
I think I think everyone's trying to take a snapshot of where we are rather than realize this is a spectrum over time. We're coming out of the most difficult economic time in our city's history for everybody. And everybody's looking at what does the future look like? And our job is to try to stabilize that economic outlook across the board. And we're trying to do that through our rescue dollars. We're trying to do it by getting everyone vaccinated so we actually can reopen our economy. And we're looking at how do we get these tens of millions of dollars in rent relief into the hands of landlords. So I think we have to see and let those programs work and then assess where we are.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens long term with the willingness of, again, especially small landlords who might have a harder time dealing with some of these protections, whether there's a decreased willingness to continue to own units and rent units in the city of Seattle. And by the way, Councilwoman Sawant doesn't want to stop at the three laws that were passed this past week. She wants to pursue other protections for renters, including if you're unable to continue to afford a unit, requiring the landlord to help pay for relocation costs associated with your move. So stay tuned to see what else comes out of the city of Seattle. All right, coming up after the break. The carefully orchestrated performance behind the ousting of a top state official and what it says about government. Stick around. There was a story this past week that summed up the absolute dysfunction of government. But worse than that, I think, the lengths that government goes to hide information from the people it serves. Jim Brunner over at the Seattle Times had this piece titled, "Washington Prisons Chief Stephen Sinclair was forced out of his job by Governor Inslee, records show." In the piece, Brunner detailed how Governor Inslee wanted Sinclair to step aside, but his office orchestrated an entire charade to make it seem like Sinclair was leaving voluntarily. The governor's office went so far as to carefully plan a series of steps that would take place behind the scenes before the public announcement of Sinclair's departure. One of those steps, according to documents obtained by the Seattle Times, was for Sinclair to inform the governor that he was leaving. Baffling, considering the governor is the one who asked him to leave. Sinclair thought it was odd too. In a notation to the governor's staff, Sinclair wrote, "Why do I need to notify the gov if he is the one who asked me to leave?" A very good question indeed, Mr. Sinclair, but considering that you worked for the state, it's a question you should have known the answer to. And the answer is that half of what our elected leaders do is for show. A planned out performance designed to fool us or to keep information from us. And it's not as if the governor had not been asked directly why Sinclair was leaving. In fact, in April, he was asked point blank, "Did you ask Steve Sinclair to resign?"
I will not give you a direct answer to your question because it's irrelevant at this point.
Actually, it is relevant. And if you really don't believe it's relevant to explain to the public why you're replacing the head of an important government agency, then I'm not sure how to explain that to you. You know, it never ceases to amaze me that politicians have such a hard time being straightforward and honest. Because apparently it's much easier to dodge questions, create an entire fake narrative behind the scenes, force the media to submit a public disclosure request to try to piece everything back together, a public disclosure request that will have to be done by state workers using public funds. Yeah, because that is a great use of everyone's time and money. All of it so the governor didn't have to explain a decision that he made as the governor, a decision that was entirely within his power to make and may very well have been the correct decision. Now, my favorite part of this entire story, and by favorite part I mean the part that makes me want to scream into a pillow, is that after Brunner at the Times found out what happened with Sinclair, the governor's office told him in part, "The governor's office won't have more to say on this." Great. So even after the truth came to light, the governor didn't care to explain his decision to the people who pay his salary. And the sad part is this kind of runaround really isn't all that uncommon for government. They've become accustomed to believing that this is their information to hide. Well, it's not. It belongs to us and it belongs to you. Now, perhaps they did all of this to spare Steve Sinclair the embarrassment of being told to resign. But that's what he signed up for when he took a government job, a job where he works at the pleasure of a politician. If you don't want your job performance subject to public intrigue, then don't take a job where you work for the public. And while we're at it, if you don't want a job where you have to own your decisions, then maybe governor isn't the best job for you. All right, thank you so much for joining us on The Divide. I will be back in studio tomorrow. In the meantime, don't forget to download and subscribe to The Divide podcast. And until next week, do something to bridge the divides happening in your own life.